Hello and welcome to this Zoom recording. We're talking to Andy Boothman today of Dress Code Shirts, and he's going to tell us all about his story and the lessons we can learn from him. So welcome, Andy.
Hello.
Good to see you. Nice shirt.
I've already done that joke.
Well, this is for the people watching the recording, you see. Yeah, so just to kick off, really, do you want to tell us a bit about you and what your influences were and how this all began?
Yeah, so where it all began is probably, so the existing business that I have, the branding business, it's successful. Really happy with where it's at. But I'll be honest, I made one kind of cataclysmic error in the way that I structured that. I built it all around me, which in the past, when I've tried to inject other faces into meetings and things like that, clients feel that they're getting shortchanged if they're not getting me. So that's a self-limiting factor to the long-term sort of end game piece of that business, which I have to admit I'm guilty of when I set it up, not thinking enough about that. And it's something that, Anne advocates very strongly, and I would completely agree. If you should start out with an end in mind, because if you don't, then, this is a classic case in point. This business is not saleable. It's also very difficult to get someone to invest in it, to be honest. So, as much as I've had a lot of fun doing it, and it's a nice, successful business, at whatever point I walk away, that's it. I'm just basically, there's nothing to sell, which is a bit hard to kind of accept when you've put over 20 years into something. But hey, that's how it is. So from that, sat down and talked to Anne and Andrew and sort of saying, well, what should we do, and what can we do to create something that does have a saleable and tangible sort of investable side to it, and talked a few ideas through, and then a really, really strange thing happened one day on the day job. I sent one of my jobs to print, and this weird print glitch thing came out of the printer, and I'm sat there swearing profusely at the machine. But then I started looking at this thing, and I thought, there's something quite nice about that. And it started this train of thought that became more and more of an itch that I needed to scratch. I was spending quite a bit of my time just playing with the whole idea of the kind of digital world and how that might be expressed, shall we say, in different things. And I've always had a strong passion for shirts. And so I started to just think, maybe there's a way that I can kind of combine these two, and it'd be nice to do the design. And it sort of snowballed, and then it got to the point where I'm thinking, I'm spending quite a lot of time thinking about this and working on it. I should really sort of decide one way or the other, is this going to be something I'm going to do, or is this just going to be a fleeting sort of whim, shall we say. So went back to Anne and Andrew and said, look, I've got this idea, this is what I'm thinking. And we kind of talked about how you make that become a real working business. What's the things it needs? What's the framing that needs to go around that? And at that moment in time, I didn't know anybody in the fashion business. I didn't know anything about clothing, how it's manufactured, the cuts, not a thing. So the first sort of piece that I needed to do was reach out and find those people. So I did that. I started just a few people that I know and see socially outside of work, people I've met networking, just saying to them, oh, I'm thinking of doing this thing. Do you know anybody? And one of the first conversations I had was with a friend while we were out cycling, actually. Ooh, somebody's
That's
got
isn't that typical? It's my doorbell. Don't worry about it.
So yeah, I just kind of voiced what I was thinking to a friend while we were out cycling, and he turned around and said, oh, I know just the person for you, and gave me this contact of a tailor. And I'm like, oh, right, okay, that's great. And made contact the following day, went to see him the following week, and he was very enthusiastic about the whole thing. And he said, oh, let me connect you with these people. And 3 weeks later, I found myself in London, sat down with a global producer who was really happy to work with me. I had kind of made some tentative phone calls, trying to approach businesses direct, and had been, quite frankly, laughed off the other end of the phone, because unless you're doing 20, 30,000 units, they don't want to know in most businesses. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, where it's kind of come from, I suppose.
I'm being unmuted. That's my next thing. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Typical, isn't it? So, did you always see yourself as an entrepreneur? Why did you become self-employed, coming out of school or coming out of
where did
that come from?
That was yeah. So when I was at school, I didn't really think of myself as an entrepreneur. That said, I always had sidelines going on when I was at school. So I was doing vehicle signage and shop livery and stuff like that when I was at school. On a weekend through the holidays, I would make the actual shop fronts and go and sign write vehicles and stuff, which gave me quite a nice little income. There was a number of other things that I did, kind of using my artistic talents, I suppose. So motorbike helmets, there was a big thing of people wanting custom designs put on them. I did a few of those. Again, quite nice money, and it's just something I enjoyed doing. So I didn't at the time view it as being entrepreneurial at all. I viewed it as kind of cash in my pocket for doing things I wanted to do as a teenager, quite frankly. But yeah, when I look back, it probably was. It wasn't done with any kind of great business prowess as such, but it was the first sort of inklings, I suppose, that it was something I enjoyed doing. Then I was lucky in that when I'd finished my design degree, out of a class or a year of nearly 50 people, there were some agencies that came from Manchester looking for taking on juniors, and they whittled that down to 12 people to interview over 4 days. I was midway through the first day, I got offered the job the second day before they'd even interviewed a load of people, which went down like a lead balloon, as you might imagine, with my rest of my friends and students. But yeah, it was a fantastic opportunity. I grabbed it and never really looked back from that point of view. Didn't last in that job that long because I found it massively frustrating that the person that owned the business didn't want to actually do anything in terms of directing people. There was massive infighting going on. But then I found out that over the course of my agency career, that happens in every agency. It just seemed to be the way they were. There was unbelievable battles that would happen between departments about who was doing what and who had the right to call the shots, all of which I absolutely hated. It was just horrific to see people practically having fights on a daily basis, and then they would pull all sorts of dodgy stunts to drop people in the doo-doo in front of clients and all sorts of stuff. Whatever you think about Mad Men, there's a lot of truth in there about that kind of area, and unfortunately, I think it still exists today as well. So I kind of quickly thought, well, I don't want to be here full time, and found a much smaller setup, much more kind of team that I connected with. It was at the point that I joined the business, there was just 2 people in it, and we grew it. I joined with another designer, and we grew the business from basically we were working out of a shed in someone's back garden to 9 people, and I'm trying to think, we were doing a couple of million a year kind of turnover as an agency, looking after some really nice clients. Did that for, about 10, 12 years. And then the financial crash came along, and everybody put the brakes on in just unbelievable levels. It seemed to be like the first thing that people would do was, oh, well, we're just going to stop, we'll stop advertising, we'll stop this, we'll stop that, we'll stop everything. And it was just like, wow. Thankfully, there was a few people that could see that they needed to keep still doing stuff, So we kind of restructured, scaled down, remained still in offices, did that for another couple of years, and then just looked, life changes happen, don't they? My daughter was born, and I'm looking at what I'm doing, and I'm thinking I'm still doing 16 hours a day in an office. We're carrying a boatload of overheads here with office premises that clients barely ever come to us. And I just thought I want to do it differently. So I stepped away from the whole thing and said, that's not for me anymore. I'm going to do it as a virtual business. It gives me more flexibility. And that was the beginning of Busy as a Bee. And that, that in its own right has now been kind of going for 6 years now. And yeah, never really looked back, because it's given me work-life balance that I could have never have had when I had the offices. And certainly the big agency stuff just scares the living daylights out of me still, in terms of the politics and the fiefdoms that go on there.
So you said that you perhaps should have set it up so that you weren't quite so central from the beginning. But I mean, my experience is that it's really hard not to do that, because when you're starting out, the way to through networking is to build relationships, and then that means that's you, and then it's very hard to step out of that later. Can you think of any ways that you maybe could have avoided that sooner, or do you think that's pretty much inevitable as a first phase?
I've tried to do it 3 times in the past. So when we were at a headcount of 9 with the agency, we looked twice at bringing in new people and kind of introducing them into the meetings. Both times we got pushback from clients to varying degrees about they just felt that they weren't getting the same level of service. Why are we not dealing with you? Why is it not one of the 4 directors that we're speaking to? Why have we got this new tier of people involved? No matter how much you kind of reassured them that nothing would change, and the work, they were still getting first class work. They wanted you, so it was really difficult piece to do. I didn't find a way through it, is the honest answer. And that's why I am where I am in terms of the way that it's set up now. It suits me, as I've said, but I agree entirely, Helen, that it is about building those relationships in the first instance, but then it's also, I guess, in terms of the way in which you service those people if they become clients, making sure that they don't become completely dependent upon you. I mean, a good example would be my biggest client that I have now is very happy to not be speaking to me about every aspect of the work that we do for them. So they'll speak to the SEO guy about stuff that he's doing. They'll speak to the people who are doing social, all as part of the collaborative team. They don't, it's not always with me. We do talk a lot, don't get me wrong, but it's not just got to be me kind of doing every piece of communication to that team, that client. They're very happy that it comes from 3 or 4 different people.
Do you think that's about setting the expectation at the beginning? Or is there more to it?
Depends on the client, to be honest. Some clients want that kind of. So with what I deliver, some clients want a very personal piece. They want to feel that they've all not they don't want to employ you, and there's many times that people have tried to employ me into stuff, saying, "Oh, why don't you come and work for us full time?" The benefit of me coming in as an external sort of viewer of what they're doing, I think is really, really powerful. Once you're within something, it's very difficult to kind of see what's going on with the same clarity, because you get sucked into systems, you get sucked into politics. We've never done this because, and suddenly, if you're going to be that person that's going to go in there and push against the grain, then you're going to ruffle a lot of feathers and not win yourself a lot of friends in the process. Whereas if you're external, you could do some of that, because you're not tainted by those things like the politics and history or whatever it might happen to be. So yeah, I think it can play both ways. But for me. I think it's better. I agree about the client expectations piece. Some clients, though, definitely want that one-to-one thing. They want to feel almost like you are the I don't know how you say it, like the right-hand person, the person that's on the team but's not on the books. So, at the point, I guess it comes more to how planned they are in their activities. So the clients that have really got a good grasp, I should say, on where they're going and what they're doing, will have a plan and will be able to voice that and articulate it to you so that you can then plan forward. The other clients that are very much more reactionary, they're the ones that are picking up the phone and going, how do we solve this? How do we kind of move forward? Now, there's their chaotic organization has a knock-on effect. So you have to also think, well, is that the sort of work we want? And if it is, then how are we going to charge that against the people who are really organized and we know what we've got to do week in, week out for the next 6 months, sort of thing. So it's horses for courses, really, I think.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting piece about actually charging more for people who are disorganized, because I hadn't really, it makes total sense, but I've not really thought about that. But yeah, I mean, if it takes more time, you're going to have to charge more for it, aren't you? It's a simple
absolutely thing. And in my line particularly, there's a lot of people that they kind of fall into those two pots, definitely, and some of them jump between the two. So there'll be people who are very organized, but then things happen and they've got to react to it quickly. And I think the kind of one of the biggest challenges I've ever faced was long-term client. We'd been working with them for about 5-6 years, and they rung up on a Tuesday and said, "Oh, we forgot to tell you, we've been sponsoring this guy that's been going around the world climbing various mountains. We've just found out he's going to make the 7th summit within 7 days on Friday, and we need to let the world know about it." And it's like, it's Tuesday, and you want to let the world know by Friday, right? Okay. So what's the plan? What is it you want to do? And they said, "I don't know. That's up to you. You come back and tell us what to do." And so it was like, right, okay. And that required an absolutely Herculean effort and pulling all the strings and personal favors from all over the place. We ended up getting them some unbelievable press coverage. I mean, they were full page in the Sunday Times, for example, and a whole host of other stuff that weekend. And the guy that owned the business was over the moon, because when he went down to get his papers both days over the weekend, all the people in the street were stopping him and saying, "Wow, we've seen your business. Wow, can't believe you've sponsored these people to do this," and all the rest of it. So they were absolutely over the moon. But there was an associated cost for that, because it was absolute carnage in the office to sort it out. I mean, the phone calls.
If anybody wants to read the full story of that, it's in Andy's Drive members interview on the website. In the Learning Hub, with some fantastic pictures of this guy climbing the mountain. Absolutely superb.
It was a great experience, but there's an associated cost for someone causing that kind of chaos to your workflow, because you've got things that you plan to do with those days, and quite frankly, we literally had to shelve everything to sort this out, because back in the days of press being a little bit slower than it is now, they were screaming it from the second that we said we wanted some spaces. They were screaming to say, "Where's the artwork?" And we're like, "Well, actually, we've only just booked this stuff." So it was crazy. But I think that clients have to understand that there's if you're going to be that chaotic, then you're going to pay for it.
Very good point. And I think, so from my point of view, I would need to stand up to them a bit more, maybe say, "Look, no, if you want that, it's going to cost that bit extra." It's easy to think, well, yeah, I mean, maybe that's an extreme case that you said, but the usual day-to-day chaos that you get, it's tempting to go, "Yeah, I'll absorb that, that's okay," just because you want to be professional and efficient.
Well, I think that comes back to what you were saying earlier, Helen, about it creates an expectation that you are the fire service to bail them out. Because I've fallen foul of that in the past, working on supermarket stuff. They were notorious for not not communicating what they needed till the 11th hour. And you thought, oh, do you know, we'll dig them out of that hole. They'll kind of respect us for it. No, you don't. The respect piece isn't there. In actual fact, you know, you're making it worse because you fixed it. So the window of opportunity that they give you then gets smaller the next time, and smaller till there comes to a point where you're just thinking to yourself, this is crazy. You know, we can't plan anything because what's going to come in next on the email or whatever, and you're running around like a cat on a hot tin roof, just and getting nowhere. And the whole respect piece, you know, because that's the thing I think in all of this, is that there's got to be respect on both sides, from you to the client, obviously, but the client needs to have respect for you and what you're doing for them as well. And if they don't, if they are just kind of seeing you as that, oh, well, you'll get me out of a jam thing, then they've got to pay for it first and foremost, but there's also a reframing piece to be done to sort of sit down and say, we can do this for you, but actually you're not getting best service by working like this. We could give you much, much better service, and it would cost you less if it was a little bit better planned. Most people are receptive to that because they hear that it's not going to cost them as much money. And lo and behold, they'll start to let you know with a bit more time before they actually need it. You know, it makes sense, but I think that it isn't necessarily it isn't part of their thought process sometimes. And you know, this comes back to what you were saying earlier about building relationships with people. When you've got a good relationship with a client, you should be able to turn around and say, I'm really sorry, but I can't do that. Or, do you realize by doing this like this, it's costing you a lot more money, and this is why. And you know, if that relationship's strong, then you can do it. You know, there's a couple of clients where I will turn around in meetings. Sometimes there'll be a half dozen or so, you know, of their people there and other external bodies, and I'll say, no, we're not doing that, or we can't do that, or you do realize that by doing it like this, what we're doing to the onward cost implications. And you know, they can accept that, well, all right, we should have planned that better, or okay, let's think, do we need it as quickly as that? You know, because that's the other thing with a lot of these things when you're a service business, is the deadlines that are applied to you are artificial anyway. It's just so that someone can, you know, sign it off somewhere and put it in a folder to say completed or whatever. It's not that there's a business critical piece involved a lot of the time. So you know, it's also getting buy-in from those people to share what it is about it that is business critical and what isn't. You know.
Fantastic advice there, and I can. I think anyone who's been on the Drive Masterminds will know that I feel like I've made just about every client mistake going in the last 6 months, and you've just avoided a few more for me. Thanks for that.
We all do, though. You know, it's all part of the learning curve.
But I think afterwards you're sort of, why didn't I see that coming? But you can't see it till you fall into it a lot of the time, can you?
Well, the other thing is, in the early days when you're just starting something, you know, you want to prove your worth. You want to add value for your customers. So you think, yeah, we'll do that. We'll go that little bit further. It will kind of cement the relationship. It can cement the relationship, but it can also be the underpinning of it as well, and undermining of it, I should say, really. You know, because they've suddenly now got a slightly different view of, oh right, I just send the email and Helen sorts that out. Then it's like, right.
So to get back to dress code, which is kind of what I know you want to talk about, and what I want to hear about as well. No, that's fine. Well, so I think, you know, you described how you got to the point where you knew you wanted to start it up. That's quite a big thing, because like you said, you weren't in the fashion world in any particular way. Obviously you had the design skills and experience there, but it's a very different thing to go from a design service business to manufacturing a product. So what kind of things did you need to do next to get set up?
So the tailor that I was put in touch with has basically been my kind of tutor, I would say, he's schooled me in all sorts of things to do with garment production. For example, there's over 30 different ways you can finish a collar on a shirt at the moment. That's just standard ones that are recognised around the world. You can do your own bespoke ones as well. And there's a language, like there is with so many things, to all the different bits that go into these things. So what you and I would refer to as needle and thread is not how it would be talked about. And the process takes longer than I think a lot of people would envisage. So you've got sampling of material, sampling of buttons, sampling of thread, of embroidery. There's a lot of R&D, I suppose you'd call it, to be honest. It's always interesting from my point of view, because it's an opportunity to learn about a whole different business. Now, there's a lot of parity in terms of the production to stuff that I've done with the branding business. So, I think some of the people I was working with were quietly relieved by the fact that I could understand a lot of the detail they were saying about the limitations of processes and the way in which they would need certain things supplying, because it's not a million miles from what I'm doing day in, day out for clients. And they were saying, oh, this is really good. We don't normally get things like this from customers. So it's like, yeah, well, I do understand some of the words. So there was a bit of crossover, but certainly, finding someone that had that knowledge and was really happy to share it was really invaluable from that point of view. Jason's got 30 years plus experience in the industry, so he's got a really strong network of people, and I'm asking all sorts of kind of schoolboy questions, I suppose, and he indulged me a lot and said, there's this, there's that, and he in himself has got an element of entrepreneurial sort of spirit about what he's doing. And, he said, well, let's see how we can kind of develop this forward together. I tell you what, I'll give you some space in the shop. The people that come in can see your product in because I'm involved with it, and I'm enjoying the kind of whole process of developing this forward. It's also from a kind of external validator point of view, I found that really, really important. So I've got my ideas about what I want to do in terms of where the design's going to go. But working with Jason and the producers that I work with, I send them quite a lot of design work, and I'll say, thinking of doing this, thinking of doing the other. And they'll come back and say, no. What are you thinking? No. And, to have that kind of open conversation where I can chuck stuff at them and say, what do you think? And they'll come back and say, that's good, wouldn't do that, think that could be a bit niche. So Jason's got over 30 years experience. The people that do production for me are a fourth generation tailoring family. So between the two of them, they've pretty much seen it all, I would say, or vast majority of what goes on. And it's really, when I go in with, I've got my favourites, and sometimes those favourites end up straight on the floor. But it's invaluable. It's finding those people that have got the experience, and 9 times out of 10 they're really happy to share it as well. If you're showing interest in their area of expertise, that whole kind of learning journey piece is really fun. The times that I've spent with Jason going through all of the different ramifications about the shirts and stuff, I can see that he's enjoying telling me the things that he loves and the details about a profession that he's been involved with for a long time. So I think it's always, it's kind of that listening piece is really, really important. And 9 times out of 10, if you are interested, people want to share what their passion is about with you. And yeah, it's been fantastic. I count myself very, very lucky in terms of connecting with people that I get on with really, really well, but the speed at which it happened is just, to this day still astounds me when I first sat down and talked about this with Anne and Andrew, and we were saying, wonder how we'll find some kind of inroads into that world, then I thought that would be 18 months, 2 years worth of just, knocking on doors, basically ringing people up, saying, I've got this idea, is there anyone that can help me, sort of thing. But it fell into place much, much quicker than that. And that's just simply by asking the questions, That's one of the things that I've learned over the course of my kind of business experience, is ask the questions of people, even the people that look like they're operating on a completely different scale to you, and you think, why do they want to speak to me, or whatever. Ask, because if you're interested in what they're doing and it's a passion of theirs, then they'll be happy to talk to you about it. And most people are pretty open and fair about these things. They don't kind of keep it all guarded. So they'll say, yeah, I need to think about doing that like that. And then we found this way, and it's so much easier, so much quicker. And that kind of shortcutting, I think you'd call it, really, is really, really powerful. Makes a huge difference in terms of how quickly you can put something together. I mean, one of the other elements of bringing dress code to life that I was aware of but didn't fully appreciate was IP and copyright protection. We're really lucky that within Drive there's a husband and wife team who are super hot on all of this stuff. They live and breathe it, have done for a long, long time. And early on, I just said to them, look, I'm doing this thing. It's in an area that's very prone to being copied, and I have no idea about what I'm doing. And they gave me a step-by-step run through of everything. And the biggest kind of learning point in that for me was I assumed everything was done online. You put something in today, it'll go through a process, it'll be validated in a few days, and you've got whatever protection it is you need. It's not like that at all. There's a 4-month window from the date that you put something in to it being green lighted. Now that's massive, the unbelievable amount of time. In terms of registering the protection on the business name, we'd only been protected for 3 weeks when we got a challenge. So it just shows you, it's absolutely invaluable piece. And I know from personal experience with things I've done for other clients, it's one of those areas that lots of people think, oh, I'm not going to put my money into that. That's an added expense that I don't need at the kind of startup point. Well, if there's anything that I've learned from my other business and doing this one, it was that if it's to be investable, it's got to be robust and watertight. So IP, yes, it's an upfront cost, but if you are doing anything that's kind of product related, then it's an absolute necessity, to be honest, because otherwise, it's only too easy for someone to kind of replicate what you're doing, and what are you going to be able to do about it? Nothing, unfortunately. So yeah, those sorts of things, really invaluable.
So how did you go about researching your idea to make sure that there was a market before you began?
It was really difficult, I've got to be honest, because it's a hard one sometimes when you do speak to people and you might show them some visuals or just share an idea. Most people are polite and don't want to kind of pour water all over your little fire or your embers. So speak to people, showing them and saying, this is what I'm thinking, and they say, oh yeah, that's good. And then what I did is I said, who do you know that's kind of in this sphere that doesn't know me, that's a little bit further removed from it? Is there somebody that you can send some of this stuff to and judge their feedback? And I did that with about a half dozen or so people. Asked them if there was 3 or 4 people that they were happy to kind of share a few visuals with and see what came back. I also kind of cold presented it to a couple of clients that are in the target audience, shall we say, and just to see what came back. And it came back pretty positive, so that's like great. And then it was really more a case of making sure no one else was already doing anything like this. So that was online research, and I'm very fortunate that I know someone who is a bit of a whiz on Global Web Index, Brandwatch, etc. And they said, "Do you know what? I think you're absolutely onto something here. There's very little from what we can see." And those tools are very expensive, and most small businesses don't have access to them. But again, I got that help and advice just on the strength of talking to someone about what I was thinking. They're like, "Oh no, we can do that for you. We'll just run that through and give you some pointers and tell you whether or not you're kind of going mad." And I don't know how expensive those processes are, but they are very expensive.
Oh, sorry, I've forgotten my next question.
Yeah,
just give me a minute. I've just engrossed there. So yeah, you can see that networking is really important to you, because every step of the way you've drawn on somebody you know. So
basically, yeah.
Tell us a bit more about your approach to that.
I think it comes back to what I was saying before, really. Don't be afraid to voice what may feel like silly ideas. Just speak to people that you know and trust and say, "I'm thinking of doing this," or "I'm looking for a way of solving this problem. Do you know anybody that does? Do you know someone that could point me in the right direction?" Because this sort of 6 degrees of separation, or whatever the term is, it's true. It's more true than you realise, to be honest. You speak to people and you say, "Oh, I'd love to speak to somebody at whatever, about this thing I'm doing," and they're like, "Oh, yeah, I know someone that works with them, or I know someone that works for them," and it's amazing how quickly you can find and speak with pretty much anybody, to be honest. I look at some of the people that I've kind of talked to about coming to speak at Drive. Some of them are like, they're operating at serious global level, and it's like, why would they want to talk to me? But then it's like, well, you never know unless you ask. So ask the question, and people are polite. People, if they're too busy, they'll say, "I'm sorry, I'm too busy." I've been desperately trying to get Julie Dean to come and speak in Cambridge for 2 years now, and she's still too busy. But we still have banter on the email about when will there be some space in your diary to come and talk to us. And it's good humoured, and I'm
she's
confident.
the creator of Cambridge Satchels, in case anybody doesn't know.
No, I didn't know her. No, thank you.
Global enterprise now, started on her kitchen table in Cambridge.
Yeah, it's just fantastic story. I've been to see her speak a couple of times and learnt a lot from her approach and the things that she's done. Amazing business, absolutely amazing. So yeah, that's, some things drop into place quicker than others. It would be the other thing. I think we're often all guilty of thinking that we'll plan it all out and this is how it'll go. Great to have the plan, because otherwise you won't do anything. You'll just go around and around in circles. But equally, you've got to be able to kind of say, well, some of those targets are going to have to be stretched. Particularly when you're looking to connect into certain networks or with certain individuals. That a lot of it is, you can influence it, but it's not completely within your control. One of the things that we're doing a lot with dress code is online influencer work, and having some fantastic success with it. Got a lot of really nice approaches from influencers themselves, rather than us having to chase them. But the flip side of the whole piece is, you give them the bits and pieces that they need. You don't have control over when they choose to share and use that. So there's some people who get stuff and they're on it and they put stuff out straight away for you. There's other people who sit on it for weeks, or in some cases months, and you're like, I'm desperate for you to do something, and you kind of, again, it's kind of this whole keep talking to them thing. What you don't want to be pushy, but just keeping them nudged forward, because it's like, please don't just sit on this for another 3 weeks. I'd really like you to post just a little bit about it if you can find time. So it's just, conversations and understanding the kind of demands that are on people's time, I think, is the other thing as well.
Mm-hmm. So where would you like dress code to go in the future? I mean, we're talking next year and then longer term as well.
Next year, I really want to have a women's range. Next year, I think it's imperative, to be honest. It was something that I would have loved to have had this year, but money only goes so far, and it just wasn't possible within the budget. So I think it's really important we have that. I think we will diversify into a bit more accessories around shirts. We've already done it, in fact, in that we've got pocket squares literally last week. But around the ladies' clothes, I'd like to see scarves as well come into play, because I think that that's another nice gift solution that we can offer. So that's the kind of vision for next year, and obviously some more men's designs as well across into that. Big vision is that we get to a kind of, I'm going to call it a happy place. I don't want to be doing millions of these things. It's never really been about that. It's about quality first and foremost. With the knowledge that I have now, when the products that you think you're buying as being quality on the high street, I would really question that, to be honest. They're not. They're mass produced, and the quality is pretty shonky when I look at what I've spent my personal money on in the past. It's not so great. So not interested in being one of those. Get it to, gosh, I don't know. Sustainable would be great, obviously in the next couple of years, and there's lots to do on that. But then going forward, I would like to build a reputation for quality product, really, and whether that's over 5 years, 10 years, I don't know. It'll be down to how much kind of energy I think I've got to keep giving to it, and what we can do to keep innovating and keeping it relevant. That's.
I think one of the things that is more likely to happen is that one of the bigger brands will make you an offer on it.
Yeah.
It'll become a niche part of a much bigger luxury brand.
Yeah. And at that point, I think that's when the sensible thing will be to say that's fantastic and thank you very much and walk away. Because that was always what it was set up to do. Coming back to starting with the end in mind. It's never been envisaged that this is another business that I'm going to run for 20 odd years. It's like, no, this is something to build and an asset to sell. Not going to make the same mistake twice, sort of thing.
Yeah. And I think if you look back, looking at Julie Dean and the satchels, she made a satchel for her daughter to take to school. It was as small as that. And then, people started saying, where can we buy them? And she started making them for friends. And similar thing with the speaker we've got at the next month's drive in Cambridge, Julia, Kath Austen.
Yeah,
she's created BB wraps, the wax-coated cotton wraps that replace one-use plastic for food use. And she's just been picked up by Cambridge Consultants, which is a massive organisation that helps small businesses to expand. And they've put a production process in that means that she can produce these cotton cloths 30 times faster than she can at the moment. So that's going to take it into a whole other area, and certainly somebody will buy that. I'm absolutely certain of it.
Yeah.
So it just shows that these things that start on the kitchen table, quite literally, can grow into something really special that is worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
But fingers crossed, Andy.
No pressure, hey.
But as you say, even if it doesn't, the experience that you've had is just going to be so valuable to your branding business.
Absolutely, it is.
I think one of the most interesting things for me is the inquiries you're getting now, based on the exposure that you're getting. From food companies and such like, who've seen what you're doing with dress code shirts, and they can see you're creating a buzz for your business. You can do the same for them. So it's all the way. It's the two things are spinning off of each other.
Yeah, I mean, it was always part of the plan, wasn't it? That this might happen. Wouldn't it be a nice thing? And it was a nice active case study for the branding business.
Yeah.
And it's proven to be better already than envisaged. You mentioned the food business that's approached me. They're just fantastic. And that's purely on the back of what they've seen done for dress code. I was explaining to somebody just yesterday as well, it's difficult with the branding business often to share the case studies of what you've done. The clients are paying you for your secrecy of not divulging all of what you're doing for them sometimes. They don't want their nearest competitor to know that it's you that's doing it. I've had that happen several times over the years where we've had, successful relationships with a client, and then their nearest competitor rings you up or emails and says, "Oh, I've been watching what you've been doing for them for the last 2 years. You're going to come and do it for us?" And it's like, well, no, I can't. I'm sorry, client confidentiality and conflict of interest and all that. But they're also, they can be quite guarded about what they are happy for you to share out, which can be quite a limiting factor. With dress code, it doesn't matter. I can share what's and all about the activities that we're doing. So, it is really, really powerful from that point of view. And whatever happens with it as a business, it will remain as a very strong case study piece to point people at for all sorts of different things, for the things that have worked and also for the things that didn't, because that's the other thing. There's always this great pressure to only talk about the things that have worked. But, we've mentioned Julie Dean, we've mentioned Kath Austen. Both of those businesses have had their failures along the way. It's not this thing that the media portray of this wonderful, we just suddenly started doing this and it just all went crazy, and it just doesn't happen, quite frankly. There's a learning curve. There's ups and downs, there's challenges for every business along the way, and there's unforeseen life events that happen as well that completely change your perspective on what it is you're doing. It's a rich tapestry.
Cambridge Satchels have had to beat off huge counterfeit problems, haven't they, from all over the world?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, when I went to see Julie in London, she was saying about one of the producers in the UK that was producing for her, and she said, I went to a site visit, they'd invited me, and she said, I'd heard rumours about things. And she said, there was this other factory, other unit across the road, and she said, it looked really similar. And she said, I asked them, what's that? And they said, it's this storage company. And she said, as I left, I decided to go over and have a look at what was in there. And she said, they'd replicated the factory with a mirror image of the other one, but it was doing her satchels with a different logo on. And she said that she was just completely aghast. She said, I didn't know what to do for like 30 seconds. And then she said, I just decided, right, I know what to do. She went and pulled the power on the production line, stood up in front of everybody and said, right, I own Cambridge Satchels. This factory will be shut down tomorrow. If you all want a job, come and talk to me. And just left all her business cards. Literally walked out, got on the phone, got lawyers and stuff involved to get it all shut down. And I think she said something like 99% of the workforce moved across to her, and she set up her own thing at the end of that, because she said that she just couldn't trust them anymore, having seen that this was what was happening. And this is where it comes back to what I was saying earlier about IP and stuff. When you've got products, you've got to be really, really careful about who's got ready access to that and what are they going to do with it, because the ability to do a rip-off or a same as, shall we say, is really, really easy.
Yeah.
But,
Shall we open it up to questions from everybody now, Helen?
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's fine. No. So I've obviously timed it right, so that's great. So yes, any questions?
I'm just unmuting people.
Okay, I've got a few.
Go.
So can you tell us a bit about, and obviously it's fine if you can't, but about the funding for dress code, you know, how much, well, not how much, but, you know, whether you needed to go externally for that and how you went about it?
I haven't gone externally. I'm using savings. I've been offered 2 investments at the moment, both of which I've kind of not neglected, but I have said I want to get proof of concept on my own terms, because I feel it's really important as part of that negotiation piece that I have some facts and figures around what the business is doing, as opposed to having that dialogue with somebody based on what ifs and, you know, a theory, shall we say. So it's been great to have 2 people sort of step forward and say, we'd love to invest in this, and we can see that there's potential. So that kind of gives me a lot of confidence about what it is that I'm doing. But equally, I feel if I was to have those dialogues now, there's no way that I could, well, the leverage piece is not mine to have at this moment in time, is it? The leverage is the investors. So I'd rather be putting my own cash into it, because I think also that keeps you much more focused and sharper on it when it's coming out of your own pocket. And then, you know, as I said, I've not completely ignored them. I've been very honest and said, this is what I want to do, but I'd love to keep talking, and we'll see what happens. You know, they may well go and chuck their money into something else. I'm sure they get lots of approaches, so we'll see.
Okay, and another couple of questions were, well, related. I can't help but feel you've made it sound relatively easy. I know I'm not saying it has been, obviously. The way you've explained the story and everything, it sounds like things, to an extent, fell into place. If that is the case, would you say that it's partly or even wholly down to your business network through what you have been doing with your other business? I know we touched on that already, but just a bit more detail on that, if you think it's sort of how much of it is down to that. And also, you know, following on from that, how much of it would you say needed specifically you to put in a lot of hard work and time to get things going?
So to answer the first part, I think it's twofold. I think it's definitely led by network and the sort of trust piece that you have going with people. I think the second part of that is this: don't be afraid to make approaches to people who you've got, you know, admiration for, businesses that you'd like to learn more about. It is amazing, you know, how receptive people will be, particularly if they've been through a similar journey themselves. You know, it's finding the right people within those organisations. The people that have come in at the latter stages, once the business is established, are doing a very different job from founders. So if you can find the people who were the founders or who were involved heavily at that moment of the business being founded, they're the people that what you're doing will resonate with them. They'll remember it. You know?
So would you say it basically comes down to finding not only the founders and, you know, people, what you just explained there, but also people who are on the same wavelength as you, and that's where it's more likely to work. So it's a personal connection.
Yeah, very much so. You know, there's the whole personal thing is a massive part of that, and I think the other thing that I learned very early on within kind of like networking is never kind of put someone in a box. Never assume that they just do that or they just do the other, because the ways in which things connect through are fascinating. You know, you will have phone calls from people and you're like, how did you get my number? Who? And it's like, and you know, those kind of, there might be 3 or 4 steps involved in some of those links and connections. And it might be from a conversation that you had with someone about the weather 3 weeks ago, or it might be someone you had a conversation with about accounts 18 months ago. who knows? There is no hard and fast rule to these things. So I think keeping an open mind about the people that you interact with, and keeping in touch with them, is really, really important.
Cool.
Really important.
And then the second part of that was, so as a result, maybe as a percentage or something, how much work specifically would you say had to come from you? So it had to be you who had to be doing it and no one else.
In terms of launching dress code, yes. I would say it's probably been about 50% of me, I would say.
Cool.
To be honest. I'd say, there's a lot of stuff that, again, this comes back to when we were first scoping out the business, and I sat with Anne and said, I don't want to be anywhere near the pick and pack. I don't want to be anywhere near the various bits, the accounts and this, that, and the other. Just I haven't got time. It's of no interest to me, and so that's all outsourced to various different people.
Yeah, and then I had one more question, but I don't really think it's for you. It was more just about, interesting to hear about all the IP stuff you were talking about, just to see, I just wondered how that might apply to a business like mine. It might not apply, certainly when you're smaller. But yeah, I was just wondering about.
If you've got a product that's unique, and you want to protect it, then I think it's every bit as applicable.
Even your logo, if you would be horrified at finding someone else using your logo, it's worth just protecting that as a trademark. And I know Bill and Rachel are very happy to talk to people about the aspects of their business that are vulnerable, and the other bits that would be very, very difficult to try and protect or trademark.
I think the other thing that I would add as well is they're very practical about, they understand that it's money that's coming out of your business and stuff like that. So they're not going to come back and say, hey, yeah, look, we can do this and we do that and we do that. And by the way, it's like 10,000 quid. They'll come back with stuff that will say, right, okay, so you're at this level. And this is the kind of level of protection we think it warrants investing in at this moment in time. There's always going to be higher levels that you can take stuff to, but that's, for me, was what I really, really enjoyed, was the fact that they would say, I sat down with them and they said, these are the things you can do, this is the kind of base level of what we would recommend, and then you can kind of escalate it from there. Gives you lots of options.
Thanks. I'm still here. I'm just sort of right behind the computer for a minute, but I'm still here and listening.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Cheers, thanks.
Anybody else?
Stunned them to silence again, Andy. Okay. Nobody's trying to speak and they're not unmuted.
Oh, well then, here we go. There we go. But yeah, happy to answer any questions. As I've said, it came together much quicker than initially envisaged, and what we've talked about this morning is pretty much what I think has been the catalysts for that.
How long did it take, actually? Because you said you expected 18 months to get to this point, I think. How long did it actually take?
18 months is where we are.
Okay.
And I expected that to be the research piece.
Oh, I see.
At the point that I was first starting out, bear in mind, no connections into the industry at all. So I thought, it'll be 18 months, 2 years, just finding some people who are happy to work with me, and we'll give it the time of day, quite frankly, because...
Having said that, you did work backwards, though, didn't you? I mean, you did have Christmas as the main selling period, so it was carefully worked back from that, wasn't it?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Yeah, it wasn't. It's not just happy chance that we launched in September. No, not by any stretch of the imagination. If it was to work, and if there was to be sales come out of the back of it, Christmas no one wants to talk about it still, but Christmas is the time for this to kind of prove its worth if it's got it.
So it really did need to be, this September or next September, didn't it? I mean, there was going to be no point in doing it in July, if you see what I mean.
Absolutely not. And, there's also a kind of a time pressure. It's all right, I've got some IP on it and everything, but if I sit on this for another 6 months, 9 months, someone else might do something very similar. I mentioned it earlier about the trademarking of the name. It was 3 weeks after dress code had been registered that I got a challenge from someone in Scotland that was going to do some coding stuff and various bits and pieces, and they wanted to use the name. And it was that close. All right, we'd been through the 4 months waiting piece, but it was kind of 3 weeks after we'd got it cleared that someone else made an attempt to register that name. So striking while the iron's hot it sounds kind of a cliche and all the rest of it, but there's a lot of time when you have just got to just do it while it's fresh, while it's there. Actually get there and move it forward, because someone else will. Is the kind of long and short of it. I think, especially the world in which we live in today, stuff's moving at an incredible pace. So if you do kind of sit on it for a period of time and procrastinate, then the kind of window of opportunity will go.
Any other questions?
I have a quick one.
Mm.
Which country are your shirts being manufactured?
They've been manufactured in 2 different countries currently, and potentially a third next year. So at the moment we are using factories in India and in Turkey. There is a chance that we may be doing some stuff in Vietnam as well next year. The reason for that is twofold. First and foremost, the quality. The quality that comes from those factories is just superb. It really is the highest quality. The second is cost. As much as I would have loved to have been able to say that we were UK manufacturing, I could not manufacture. I could sell shirts perhaps maybe to 1 or 2 people a year at the prices that they were going to cost me to make in the UK. It was just so expensive. It's a real shame that we used to, several decades ago, actually over 100 years ago, be a global kind of source of all things millinery and cloth. All of that's been neglected. There is a skeleton of what was formerly a very strong business there. There's 1 or 2 people that are still doing really, really nice stuff, but it's not for anything that's other than ultra premium, to be honest, which is a real shame.
Probably for more for a personal chat when we meet or something, but be interesting to hear your thoughts on why it's gone that way.
Yeah,
let's not get into the
it was completely for another time.
Yeah,
that's an obvious question that comes to mind when you hear something like that.
Yeah. That's a bottle of wine question.
Yeah,
yeah.
Several bottles of wine question. That one.
Sorry, is it Friday already?
So why 2 countries rather than just the one? You said
why
Turkey
2 countries?
and
So just because the family that I'm working with have got two factories, quite frankly, and to sort of to spread the risk a little bit. So we're not doing it all in one place. So it's not a case of, well, if they get really busy there, then what's going to happen to production. So it's like, right, okay, well, we'll split it. It's kind of slightly hedging your bets. So should things go well, we can escalate things quicker by having it dual-sided. It is a risk. There's no 2 ways about it, but it felt like the right thing to do at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
So just remind me again, it was Turkey and where else?
India.
Okay, cool. And the third one was going to be?
Vietnam.
Vietnam. Right.
Yeah. All the people I'm working with are family businesses. So they're not the sort of people who are making stuff for high street chains, because that kind of production is done at an entirely different level. You're talking, as I said, minimum 20,000-30,000 units per order, which has got a lot of zeros in the price.
And I guess you get more control over the ethics of the situation as well, then, don't you? Because that's a big issue at the moment. Ethical clothes production.
Yeah,
and I'm sure your customers will want to know that's
no, I mean, we're a small player in a very big market from that point of view, so our influence is not great. But that said, it's a fourth generation family business I'm working with, so what they're doing has to be sustainable. It has to have ethics and stuff for it to still exist today. I think there's bigger pieces to be done, without a doubt, across the board for everybody. But I think we also have to look at ourselves as consumers and think about how much of this is on our shoulders, because we're driving price down, and we have throwaway fashion now. And there's a price for that. It might not be a physical price in your pocket, but it's a price to the planet.
I feel another bottle of wine conversation coming on there.
Yeah, I think it's a big subject, and certainly something that's very front of mind at the moment for everybody. Myself, absolutely, it is there. We're doing what we can with our small bit, but it is, there's a much bigger piece.
But I mean, at least your own supply chain. I know there was, it's maybe cleaned up a bit lately, but a few years ago, some of the really big chains, they didn't really know where their clothes came from exactly. So it wasn't entirely traceable, and yours will be if you're going to small businesses.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? It comes back to it being quality and premium. You pay for that. You pay for that kind of traceability. When you're going and buying various things for less than £5 on the high street these days, which is what some of the bigger ones are doing, there's a reason that they're doing that cheap. You can't assume that the people who are making that are being well treated when you're only paying a couple of pounds for an item. You can't assume that the materials are going to be well sourced. We do have to kind of look at ourselves a bit sometimes, I think, about these things, and think, well, if you're only paying a few pounds for it, there's a good reason for that. Corners are going to have been cut.
Andy, what about work-life balance? You said earlier that your work-life balance was really good with your first business. Do you still find that that's true now? You're running two businesses and you've got, children under 5 or however old they are. They're quite small, aren't they?
They are quite small. You are absolutely spot on. So one of the first things that I did the week after we launched was I've outsourced even another big piece of what was involved with dress code to somebody. So I've got a lady that I'm working with who works for me a day and a half a week purely on dress code, just because there's a limit to what you can do, and the headspace that you need as well to think about these things. So it's much better that I take a more strategic view on some of the things that are going on around dress code, and then give other people the tasks of implementing that. So, a lot of the stuff that we're doing at the moment involves research, collecting data, to understand more about the people that are interested in our product. Now, that is time consuming without no shadow of a doubt, and that's what we're doing. That's what this person is doing for me a lot at the moment. So don't get me wrong, there's ebbs and flows to all these things. There are days when, with the best will in the world, everything seems to kind of conspire against you or whatever, and whatever contingencies you have in place, they have to come into force. That's just life, Monday, classic case in point, everything kind of running along smoothly. 12 o'clock, the children's nanny rings up, I'm ill, I can't come in. At 3 o'clock, my wife's at work all day. It's like, right, okay, well then I'm down in tools at 3 o'clock and, looking after the kids. Now, if I was in an office, I couldn't have done that. So whilst it might not still be ideal, it's a damn sight better than what it would have been with, you know, other alternatives. And yeah, there's some days when things are a stretch. I'm not going to deny that. You know, but equally, it's a case of looking where we are now and planning it. And, you know, now that I've got a dedicated person on dress code, then we can build that going forward. So we're at a day and a half at the moment because that's what feels manageable, and from a cost point of view, as well as actually growing the business. But there's no reason that won't develop into more, you know, and then maybe another pair of hands doing something else. We'll just see how it goes, to be honest with you. It's, as you say, keeping the balance thing going is really, really important.
So another thing, you've mentioned outsourcing quite a bit. And I know you said at the beginning about, you know, how you should have started with the ending, perhaps done a bit more of that sooner.
Yeah.
How would you personally advise smaller businesses who, you know, are much more strapped for cash and haven't been going for very long, or even just started up literally?
Yeah.
What would you say to them about outsourcing? Because it is obviously ideal that that's what everyone should be doing.
Yeah.
But if cash is tight, how would you advise on that?
I think you've got to look at where your profitability is coming from. And if your profitability is coming from you and your skills to deliver, then you have to say, right, if I've got 6 hours in the day to work, what's my earning potential of those 6 hours, and whatever it might happen to be. Then look at the things that you either don't want to do or don't feel is particularly your skill set, and say, right, what's that going to cost me? As long as it's not going to cost you more than what you're earning, then it's worth the investment, because there's only so much to what you can do with your capacity each day. And yeah, it's just a case of recognizing where your time's best spent, where you're going to see the best returns on your investment. And you know, try a few stuff. One of the beauties of outsourcing is you're not tied into massive contracts with these people. You know, a lot of the time, particularly with my design business, I'm working with freelancers, so you know, they're happy to be doing stuff almost ad hoc in some instances. It doesn't tend to be that much with what we're doing in the design business. I'm loyal to them, they're loyal to me, etc., etc. So we have ongoing stuff. But in the early days, you know, you can say to someone, right, I need some help with this. Could you give me X hours a week, or could you give me, you know, I don't know. You can frame it in lots of different ways, and there's a myriad of different people out there offering stuff at different levels. So I don't think
the conversation that Helen and I had just the other week, wasn't it? Just the other day, that, you know, if you invest in someone else working in your business, it frees you up to do the work that you like doing, but that also should be earning a lot more money than the person you're paying to do something else.
Yeah.
You know, so as Andy says, you know, if you can spend 6 hours a day earning your maximum potential rather than doing admin work or something else that somebody else could do for a lot less per hour, then it just makes sense.
I think the other thing is kind of
limit your growth.
It's kind of not being a complete control freak, is the
that came up quite a bit last Thursday at the Work Smart Not Hard workshop.
Yes.
this business, but I want to do it myself. You know, I've got to do it myself. I want to know how it works.
That was the accountant in the room.
I think that's everybody, to be honest with you. I think, you know, these businesses, they're your thing. You've formed it, you've created it, you're passionate about it, you know, you're delivering it. You want it to be delivered as well as it can be. And so you think, oh well, I should do that, and suddenly you've got, you know, a job list as long as your arm, and you haven't even touched any of your stuff that you should be doing in terms of the delivery, because you're doing all the peripheral pieces. So yeah, I think sitting down and looking at what will bring in the revenue in the first instance, and then really being clear with whoever you're working with from an outsourced point of view to say, this is what I can afford. What can you give me? Or, you know, or however you want to frame that piece with them, but be very clear about what it is you need and what kind of budget you have for that, and then you can test it. It's
yeah. I think you're right about the testing thing, because well, I mean, looking now at me personally, I want to get something, someone to help with some marketing and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But I've been completely apprehensive about doing it because, marketing is one of those things where you don't necessarily see any results until quite a few months down the line.
Yep.
By which time, how much money have you thrown at it, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's a bit hard to gauge what to do on that one.
Yeah, I would say it's a classic kind of catch-22 piece, to be honest, from that point of view. This is where it comes back to a confidence piece as well. I had this conversation last night with a couple of people just before we did the Pecha Kucha talks, and they both said to me, "You just seem really relaxed." And I said, "Well, it's the classic kind of elegant swan thing." I said, you glide about looking seemingly all sorted and everything, whilst underneath you are paddling like absolute billiard, and there's a lot of truth in that, that kind of confidence piece of delivering a smart, slick operation. That instills confidence in the people you're working for, and so it kind of perpetuates the other people that are working with you to deliver that. If you're presenting it as slick and smooth, they will up their game to make it slick and smooth, and it's infectious. But it does require you to present it well in the first instance. You go in a bit shaky, whether it be to someone that you're going to outsource or to a client, then that's not going to start well, unfortunately, and it will only go downhill from there. Whereas if you're projecting confidence and you're projecting we're doing this, this is the direction, there's a dynamic about it, then it is infectious. It rubs off, onto other people. You can see that when you go to networking meetings. The people that are inspired in the room from the conversations that they've heard. But then the key thing is doing something about it the day after, when reality is set back in and you're back to the day job and stuff, rather than it just kind of wandering in and out of your brain, actually kind of making it an actionable point sort of thing.
Yeah, and just expanding on that, not really on topic, but people who are happy, who project a wonderful positive image, always attract other people. You wander about the room saying, "Oh God, the business is terrible." Nobody wants to know.
Yeah.
It's the old, misery.
Well, yeah, everybody's got their issues, haven't they? You just don't need to share it in public.
And that's the thing. I mean, the public bit is important, because we do have this wonderful Slack group where people can share anything and get loads and loads of support when they are feeling shitty. I shouldn't have said that. I'm recording. But you know what I mean. You don't want to keep it to yourself, because there is help there. But it's much better done in private, in a trusted community, rather than just out there in public. Because the other thing is, I mean, I see so much oversharing on social media, and I often think to myself, if I was your client, I'd be having second thoughts about employing you right now, because you sound as though you might just go off sick or do something or whatever. You just don't sound as though you're in a place to give me good service.
Yeah.
So there's a real balance to be had there.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that you've got to be careful about what you would put on social around those sorts of things in particular. Yeah. Any other questions?
Okay. Right, I will stop recording then. So, Helen, I don't know if you just want to pop back in and close this off.
Helen, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
No, just wanted to say thanks very much to Andy, and thanks for the last minute change of plan and everybody coming along. That's been great, and that's one of the fantastic things about Drive. You just say, well, we're going to do it a little bit differently, and everyone's like, yep, and they're with you. You know, it's great. It's just such a positive group of people to be with. So thanks, Andy. Thanks for coming, everybody, and we'll see you in the Facebook group.
Take care, folks.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye.